A quick like and subscribe really helps our channel grow and allows us to bring you even more amazing content. Thank you for your support. In a world that sometimes feels strained by the clamor of differing tongues, I found myself at the center of a linguistic tug-of-war with my husband, Tom. I've always had a deep passion for the German language. It had been a part of my life since I was a child, nurtured by bedtime stories my grandmother would tell me in her lilting accent. When Tom and I met in college, I was amazed at how he soaked in those stories too, admiring my enthusiasm for a culture that seemed so distant to him, an American born and bred. Over the years, that admiration blossomed into love, but in the intimacy of our shared life, our once attractive differences began to fray at the edges. Tom studied German diligently for a while but soon found the nuances overwhelming, preferring to converse in the simple, comforting rhythms of English. But I loved to practice my German, and as the months slipped into years, it became my default language, a habitual comfort zone that I didn't realize was isolating him. One quiet evening after dinner, the familiar dance of our conversation took an unexpected turn when he asked me, gently but firmly, if I could refrain from speaking German at home as it sometimes made him feel excluded. The request struck me deeply. It felt like a rejection of a part of who I was, yet his eyes had that vulnerable glint that said he was struggling with his own feelings too. I was torn. Should I honor his request, sacrificing my linguistic flair for the sake of his comfort, or could I, in good conscience, continue speaking German, even if it meant detracting from our shared space? My thoughts churned that night, the shadows of self-doubt creeping in, mimicking our sad quiet as we ended the day. Was I the asshole for wanting to indulge in something that was such a part of me, or was I merely turning my back on a plea from the heart? Days turned into a strange dance of half-phrases in English and attempts at German that felt like a betrayal to the warmth and fluidity I thrived in. I saw flashes of disappointment in Tom's eyes each time I caught myself slipping back into my cherished words. It was an unnerving cycle. Each apology towards him felt like another nail in my own heart. The bright candlelight of our evenings dimmed, booths in our favorite restaurants filled with the silence of unspoken grievances. It wasn't until a particularly stormy night that we truly cracked open the chasm between us. Sitting in our living room, rain like a relentless drum on the roof, I finally laid bare my emotions. I told him how important it was for me to retain that part of my personality, that it felt as intrinsic to my being as breathing. And there in that cozy, rain-soaked space, our hearts opened wide, he admitted that while he loved me and admired my passion, he sometimes felt like he was on the outside looking in. It was a powerful exchange, raw and painful, but it was illuminated by an understanding that only deepened our bond. We spoke until the rain slowed, weaving through layers of our emotions, fears, and desires. By the end, we found a middle ground. We agreed that I could speak German during specific times, perhaps in moments of playfulness or passion, while committing to using English for our everyday conversations. It was a compromise born out of respect and love, a promise to nurture both my passion and his feelings. Months later, wrapped in the warmth of our love and mutual respect, I found joy in the sounds of both languages echoing through our home. I realized that love, like language, is best expressed in fluidity and understanding. We created our own little world, embracing a balance that felt harmonious, a beautiful cacophony of English conversations sprinkled with delightful German whispers. Sometimes, in those quiet moments, I catch Tom grinning when I slip into German to narrate a mundane event. It's a reassuring reminder that rather than diminishing our connection, my passion is woven seamlessly into our shared rhythm. It brings us closer, sparking late-night discussions about culture and identity, far more intimate than a mere exchange of words. As for my own internal conflict, it reshaped me into a partner who learned the beauty of compromise, whose heart echoes with gratitude for the understanding we carved from our differences. And on particularly slow afternoons, we sometimes find ourselves curled up with a book of German fairy tales, and for just a moment, the language that brought me to life becomes a bridge we walk hand in hand upon. However, our peaceful coexistence faced an unexpected challenge that I hadn't seen coming, and it started rather innocuously, with a flurry of messages from a close friend who was traveling to Germany. She was sending me pictures of charming villages, bustling markets, and the kind of enchanting landscapes that always called to my adventurous spirit. Each image ignited a longing within me, stirring the remnants of my passion for the language and culture as if I were being beckoned back to my roots. I found myself daydreaming about walking among the timber-framed houses of Rothenburg ob der Tauber, sipping coffee in a quaint cafe while laboriously picking apart the intricacies of my beloved language. With each ecstatic message I shared with my husband, Oliver, I ventured deeper into my reminiscing. But then a thought began to fester like a shadow in the back of my mind, I was slipping away from our shared language, and would that not create a rift again? In a moment that felt like a culmination of tension, I set my phone down and took a deep breath, deciding to tell him. One evening, while we prepared dinner, I casually mentioned how much I missed speaking German fluently. As I said those words, I felt the sparks that often flew between us dim just slightly. He cleared his throat, his back turned to me as the garlic sizzled in the pan. "You know it's hard for me when you speak that way," he replied softly, the uncharacteristic strain in his voice tinging my excitement with remorse. I felt the warmth of the kitchen wrap around us, but a chill crept into my heart. I could see where this was headed. I was about to dance on the edges of our previous discussions, tiptoeing around old insecurities. My mind raced as I weighed the prospect of expressing my desire against the well-worn caution of his sensitivity toward my enthusiasm. In his eyes, my love for the language sometimes felt like a conflation of identities, a risk that threatened to dilute the bond we had carefully rebuilt. It was never that he didn't appreciate the beauty of it, he just felt far removed from it, as if it were a melodious tune he couldn't fully hear. I offered a kind smile and said, "How about we practice together? Just a little? It might help us connect even more." For a moment, his shoulders dropped as if a weight had been lifted, and then that familiar tension began to creep back. "I don't want to feel left out," he said, a hint of defeat in his voice. It cut deep. I had unknowingly placed him into a familiar corner, a place that meant both of us retreading an old, risky narrative. Yet, this time, I saw an opportunity. Instead of focusing on our differences, I could bring him into my passion rather than pushing him away from it. I let silence envelop us, letting his thoughts swirl in the still air of the kitchen, and when it felt right, I proposed a solution. What if I spoke as fluently as I wanted, but also shared the meaning? I could help bridge the language too, like I did before. We could find a balance. Slowly, I watched as his frown morphed into thoughtfulness. "You truly want to bring me with you, don't you?" he asked with a cautious smile. "I do," I affirmed, the sincerity ringing in my heart, resonating through the air like the faint echo of a bell. Over the next few months, we began a new chapter together, one marked by our evenings spent in our cozy living room, dictionaries and notes sprawled around us, laughter punctuating the soft hum of our conversations. I shared with Oliver the stories behind the words, the richness of expressions and idioms that had once captivated me. I watched as his eyes lit up when unraveling the humor of a joke in German or realizing the affection imbued in a simple phrase. We even began to weave our private language, a blend of English and German that was uniquely ours. But with each passing week, our discussions deepened. The language, once a bridge and then a wall, transformed into a tapestry that enveloped us in colors of understanding. We talked about identity, culture, and our values, each thread strengthening the bond we had constructed over our differences. We shared our fears, Oliver expressing the insecurities of feeling linguistically inadequate, while I confessed my worries of losing touch with my heritage. And in those moments, the air filled with a shared understanding that surpassed words. Months later, as I nestled into the warmth of our oversized couch one rainy evening, surrounded by books and a steaming cup of herbal tea, it struck me how beautifully we had rebuilt our connection. The gray clouds draped outside, yet inside, it felt eternally sunlit with warmth and understanding. With my skin tingling from the memories of our journey, I decided to share our progress in a post on a Reddit community that focused on relationships. I titled my thread "A myth asshole wibta if I only spoke German to my husband despite him requesting I don't?" But as I typed, it felt less like a plea for validation and more a celebration of a love that had transcended language barriers. Lastly, I fondly recounted our journey, the blending of cultures, how we found our rhythm again, and I concluded with a question to the community: have you found harmony in your differences? As I posted it, a sense of relief washed over me. I had made it through a tumultuous chapter, and now we stood, hand in hand, ready to explore the landscapes of our vibrant, shared life together. Soon after, I received a wave of supportive and insightful replies, many expressing similar experiences, which encouraged me further. Later that night, as I drifted off to sleep, I looked over at Oliver, his peaceful face illuminated by the moonlight streaming through our window. I realized anew that love, much like language, is a journey, not a destination. Each step we took together unveiled not just the beauty in our differences, but also the harmony that lay within, patiently waiting to be discovered. As the soft glow of dawn began to fill our bedroom, I stirred awake to find Oliver already up, immersed in his morning ritual of brewing coffee. The rich aroma seeped through the air, weaving itself into the fabric of my thoughts. I watched him from the comfort of our rumpled bed, the way the sun kissed his tousled hair, and felt a swell of affection. This was our life, a gentle dance of routine and spontaneity. But underneath the surface, excitement tinged with a sense of trepidation lingered. Today marked the beginning of my exploration into joining a local German conversation group. After my post online, a number of people had urged me to enhance my language skills further, not just for my own fulfillment but for the bridge it could build between Oliver and me. I knew he wanted me to improve my English as well, and while he supported my passion, there was still a mutual understanding hovering between us that needed to be navigated carefully. The group met in a cozy cafe downtown, where laughter mingled with the sounds of clinking cups and the soft whir of the espresso machine. As I stepped inside, the chatter seemed to swallow me whole. I spotted a table filled with fellow language adventurers, each with a story and a shared commitment to embracing a new tongue. With a nervous smile, I slid into an empty chair, the warmth of the gathering slowly enveloping me. Conversations took flight as we practiced phrases, stuttered over difficult pronunciations, and stumbled through the occasional awkward silence, laughter breaking the tension. I felt a spark of something familiar igniting within me, an eagerness to embrace the nuances. It was exhilarating, yet I couldn't shake the thought of Oliver, wondering if he would feel left out or if he was simply letting me fly on this new adventure. That evening, as we settled back into our routine, I couldn't help but share my excitement with Oliver. His face lit up with a genuine smile, yet beneath the enthusiasm, I sensed a flicker of apprehension. "It sounds amazing, actually," he said, pausing as if weighing his words carefully. "But promise me you'll still speak with me in English when we're home. I want you to feel free to express yourself with me fully." His earnest gaze met mine, sincerity draping each syllable in warmth. As I nodded, I could feel the weight of our unspoken understanding, a desire to balance my passion with the importance of our connection. However, the next few days were an exercise in self-discipline and compromise. I found myself wanting to slip into German more often, the phrases just at the tip of my tongue, eager to dance into the spaces we shared. But in doing so, I sometimes caught a glimpse of Oliver's discomfort, the furrowed brow when he couldn't follow my excitement, the brief silence when I spoke a sentence too rapid in my newfound confidence. This tug of war between my zeal and his request started to weigh on my heart. Were the walls I erected to protect my love inadvertently turning impenetrable? After a particularly frustrating attempt at explaining a simple story in German to him, resulting in more confusion than connection, I felt a rush of guilt clawing at my insides. I walked to the window, looking out at the twilight blending into night, the world outside a tapestry of muted colors. It struck me then how language, glorious as it could be, was a tool meant for connection, not division. Perhaps I had let my excitement overshadow the core of our relationship, and a wave of remorse flooded over me as I thought of our conversations where he patiently navigated between my two languages. That night, I made a decision. I turned to Oliver, who was curled up with a book of his own, and took a deep breath. "How about we create space for both?" I suggested softly, and he glanced up, surprise flickering across his features. "Let's set aside specific times for German. And when you're tired or lost, I'll be right here, ready to help you navigate back to English. Let's learn together." His eyes shone with a mix of understanding and relief as a smile broke across his face. In the following weeks, we embraced this newfound rhythm. Each night, we dipped into German for a little while, navigating through stories, fairy tales we both loved, or snippets from the news that intrigued us. When the words stumbled, we laughed until our stomachs hurt, and I cherished the look in his eyes as they sparkled with shared discovery and patience. Our evenings were filled with light-hearted attempts at pronunciation, playful teasing when one of us would mix up words, and the comforting realization that no matter the language, love threaded itself seamlessly between us. As I lay in bed amidst the whispers of night, I smiled, feeling a warmth blanket around my heart. I had aimed for fluency, but what I had found was something richer, an intimacy forged through compassion and understanding. Each mistake became a stepping stone, revealing the path that lay not just to understanding German, but deeper connections that breathed life into our relationship. The journey of language became a metaphor for our love story, filled with missteps yet painted with the beauty of growth, both together and individually. And as I reached for Oliver's hand, I realized that love, like language, was a living, breathing entity, forever expanding, ever changing, but always anchored in the safety of shared affection. Hiding my expensive shampoo and conditioner from my friend's guest wasn't a decision I took lightly, but as I stood in my small, dimly lit bathroom, I felt a mix of anxiety and determination swirling in my chest. I worked hard to earn the little luxuries in my life, especially my indulgent hair products that had become something of a personal ritual. To call them expensive seemed an understatement, They were a splurge, a treat for myself after months of saving and budgeting. My bathroom had always felt like a sanctuary, a place where I could retreat from the chaos of the outside world. I kept it meticulously organized, arranging everything on its shelves with care. But recently, a shadow had crossed the threshold of my sanctuary: Jess, my impulsive yet adventurous friend who had just moved into her new apartment. She invited me over often, and I loved spending time in her vibrant, chaotic space. However, Jess had this adorable but reckless knack for inviting people to stay over without asking, and her latest guest, Tara, seemed to embody all of Jess's wildest impulses. The first time Tara crashed at Jess's place, I was surprised at how quickly the two hit it off. Tara was a friend, someone I hadn't known well but instantly sensed was not particularly mindful of personal boundaries, especially when it came to possessions that didn't belong to her. When I learned she was staying for a few weeks, I started to feel uneasy, especially about my beloved shampoo and conditioner that I'd proudly displayed on my bathroom shelf. My routine had always included a lavish wash and condition cycle that lulled me into a sense of peace. I dreaded the idea of Tara, with her carelessness, pouring things out like they were a bottle of cheap soda. I couldn't help but imagine the horror of her washing her hair with my expensive products, treating them like mere souvenirs from the drugstore. Gradually, the creeping anxiety prompted me to act. One night, armed with the notion that this was, quite simply, my hair ritual we were talking about, I tucked both bottles away in the back corner of my closet, swaddled in soft towels, the equivalent of a security blanket. It felt a bit ridiculous, but as I tucked the last towel around them, a sense of relief washed over me like a soothing balm. I convinced myself this wasn't about being selfish, it was about protecting a cherished part of my routine. Yet, the first morning after doing so, a wave of guilt crashed over me. I knew Jess would find it odd if Tara expressed interest in trying to use my products and got no response. That guilt clung to me through breakfast, settling deep in my stomach as Jess happened to mention Tara's curiosity about my shower setup. A part of me wanted to say, "Oh, I hid my shampoo," but I never found the words. Instead, I casually brushed it off, hoping Jess would do the same. That evening, as I basked in my freshly cleaned hair, I overheard Jess telling Tara about my shampoo and conditioner. I felt my heart speed up. I knew she could have easily sought them out. The sheer panic coursing through me was further amplified when I overheard Tara excitedly asking if she could use them. Oh no, I thought, my heart sinking. My mind raced at the thought of my precious products being neglected, warped into a messy heap of potentially sticky hair. I knew I needed to keep them safe, to preserve my little corner of joy, but part of me felt like a villain for shutting my friend out from sharing in that joy. Weeks passed. I never let Tara close enough to my bathroom to even know what awaited her behind that perfectly organized door. Jess noticed my retreat into the bathroom, the strange avoidance of discussing products, and the unspoken tension grew. One afternoon, the gentle rain tapped on the window as we lounged on the couch, and Jess innocently broke the silence. "Why don't you like Tara?" After a long silence, I finally admitted the truth. I could feel my voice vibrating with anxiety as I explained everything: my fear, the guilty pleasure of my routine, and how I wanted to protect it from something outside of my control. Jess listened, her expression thoughtful. "It's okay to worry about your things, but you could have trusted me or Tara with it." I hadn't thought of it that way. It was a wake-up call, and even though I felt a weight lift off my chest, I still worried about how to turn around this small mountain of tension. That evening, I decided to take a step toward resolution. I apologized to Jess for hiding my shampoo and asked her to invite Tara to my place and share my routine with her. That night, I found myself pouring the leftover conditioner effortlessly into 2 fun little travel bottles, each adorned with tags from the local craft store. I felt a little silly but undeniably excited. As Jess and Tara cooed over the softness of my hair and products that now graced Tara's curls too, my heart swelled with an unexpected warmth. In that moment, the worry faded and revealed a simple truth: sometimes, sharing your treasures can create a bond far deeper than anything you could have imagined. I learned that night the importance of trust, and the joy that can spring from letting someone in. In time, Tara began to understand the reason behind my initial hesitation and even sought out her own version of expensive hair care, which made us laugh. It turned out the deeper conflict wasn't me being protective of my possessions but rather the challenge of allowing kindness and vulnerability to thrive in the face of anxiety. Update: a few months later, as we were all sprawled in Jess's living room post-movie, Tara casually remarked about how my products had been a game changer for her hair. A shared celebration emerged from that little mention, and in the light of her compliment, I realized my shampoo and conditioner had become a bridge rather than a barrier, strengthening the bond of friendship we had forged together. Just like that. The little pieces of my past no longer felt like possessions to guard, but instead reminders of how precious connections can be when fears are set aside. As the afternoon sun filtered through the sheer curtains of Jess's living room, casting gentle patterns on the floor, I found myself wrapped in a comfort I hadn't anticipated. The remnants of popcorn littered the coffee table, and the warm laughter of my friends mingled with the last fading echoes of the movie we had just finished watching. Jess, ever the host, had arranged an impressive spread of snacks, and the sweet familiarity in the air was both soothing and invigorating. Tara's passing comment about my luxurious shampoo and conditioner stirred something profound within me. I had always viewed my hair products as artifacts of exclusivity, treasures to be safeguarded like fragile relics from a past that felt so foreign now. I'd held so tightly to my fears about sharing them, fears that stemmed from memories of being laughed at for my tastes, or feeling out of place when unable to relate to the more frugal habits of others. Yet, sitting there, watching the joy spread across Tara's face as she spoke about how my products had transformed her hair, I realized that I had unwittingly constructed unnecessary walls around my treasures. Each game changer she recounted served as a testament to the bonds we were building, not just over hair care but over shared experiences and vulnerabilities. The tension in my chest, which once tightened at the thought of my belongings being under someone else's unappreciative gaze, began to dissolve like ice on a warm day. As the conversation flowed and we made plans for our next movie night, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief wash over me. I was gradually learning that sharing a part of myself didn't deplete my identity, instead, it enriched the connection we had cultivated. It inspired me to reflect on my resistance to letting others in. I had spent so long afraid that my belongings might define me in ways I didn't want, when in actuality, they had become a thread in the fabric of our friendship, just like the conversations we shared about dreams, ambitions, and insecurities. In the weeks that followed, I began not only to share my shampoo and conditioner with Tara but also to be more open about my other passions. One evening, while we were sitting on the porch, I showed her my collection of rare vinyl records, each with a story behind it. Tara listened intently, her eyes sparkling with curiosity, and soon we were immersed in discussions about music that led us to swap recommendations and have deep conversations about the feelings that different albums evoked in us. I began to see my unique preferences, whether in hair care or music, as invitations rather than barriers, inviting connections where I might have otherwise been guarded. As these connections blossomed, it became clear that my journey was no longer just about overcoming anxiety, it had transformed into a celebration of shared experiences. My friends often joked about being product prescribers, each confidently recommending their go-to beauty secrets or stylistic tips, and with every laugh and playful criticism, I felt more at home. We even joked about hosting a hair care night where we'd explore different styles while trading our favorite products. It inspired me to create a cozy, safe space where everyone could come together, no longer just around possessions but around an openness to learn and share. Looking back, I realized that my initial instinct to hide my shampoo and conditioner had stemmed from a fear of vulnerability, yet here I was, a few months later, celebrating connections that had formed not in spite of my unique identity but because of it. I had found a community that cherished each other's quirks, welcoming all that made us who we are. This realization settled in my heart like a warm glow, reminding me that sometimes, the things we fear most about sharing are the very things that unlock a deeper understanding within our relationships. So, when Tara reminisced about that fateful day in Jess's living room, it wasn't just a compliment, it was that shared bridge, a memory that would always remind me of the importance of opening my heart and allowing friendship to weave its way into the fabric of my life. And as we all gathered again for those cozy movie nights, my heart swelled with gratitude, for I had learned that the most precious possessions of all are the bonds we cultivate and cherish with those we hold dear. Our evenings together soon became a ritual, a sanctuary filled with laughter, old movies, and the steady ebb and flow of conversation that deepened our friendships. Tara, with her infectious enthusiasm, often took the lead, introducing us to the latest comedies or nostalgic flicks from the 90s. Each time we settled in on the couch, popcorn in hand, I couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed since I first met them. The little insecurities I had once clung to, my fear of losing my prized hair products or the jealousy I felt when Tara first used them, had transformed into a comfort, a reminder that vulnerability could be the cornerstone of connection. There was something about seeing Tara effortlessly toss her hair over her shoulder, the glossy shine catching the light like a beautifully woven thread connecting us all. One evening, after binge-watching a series, the topic shifted to future plans, dreams and aspirations, the the kind that often linger in the quiet corners of our minds. Tara spoke of her ambition to start a blog about beauty and self-care, a project that had been simmering just beneath the surface. As she spoke, I felt a bubbling sense of pride for her, tinged with a familiar pull of envy. It seemed so effortless for her, proclaiming her passion to the world, while I'd always been apprehensive about sharing my own nuances with others. It was then that I remembered the first day she had borrowed my shampoo, the piano line of laughter spilling from her lips when I first revealed my stash, the way she had touched each bottle with reverence, as if holding a gem. After a thoughtful pause, I decided to share, a leap of faith that surprised even me. I opened up about my trepidation towards vulnerability and how I had kept my products hidden, all of it transforming into an opportunity to encourage her ambition. Tara listened, her expression shifting from curiosity to understanding, and as she did, Jess chimed in, sharing her own struggles with self-doubt. There was a flicker of realization in the air, an unspoken bond that connected the three of us through shared fears and expectations. For that brief moment, it felt as if I was peeling back the layers of a protective shell, bearing parts of myself that had long been closed off. As our conversation became more heartfelt, laughter mingling with a shared sense of vulnerability, I felt the weight of my earlier insecurities lift. It was a relief to acknowledge that we all had our ups and downs, insecurities and aspirations alike, and our friendship had become a safe space where we could lay it all bare. On that night, we forged a pact to not only support each other in achieving our dreams but also to celebrate our failures as part of this imperfect, beautiful tapestry we were weaving together. Weeks rolled into months, and soon Tara launched her blog, drawing from every laugh, every tear, and every awkward moment we had shared as friends. I watched her thrive, and with each updated post she published, I felt a part of that journey. She was my friend, and in her success, I celebrated my own triumph over my fears. That bond we formed wasn't just about my shampoo, it was a reflection of understanding, trust, and the beautiful messiness of life. In the quiet hours of the night, as I lay beneath the comforting weight of my blankets, I often found myself smiling, recalling the beginning of this incredible journey. The threads woven through friendship had become the very fabric of my existence, reminding me that every data point of insecurity dissolved in the glow of genuine connections. The profound lesson I learned, encased in the simplicity of shared moments over popcorn and laughter, was that authenticity in relationships can turn even our smallest concerns into a celebration of vulnerability, crafting a life that's rich not in possessions, but deep in love and understanding. And every time I reached for my bottles of shampoo and conditioner, I smiled, knowing they now served not just a personal ritual, but a reminder of the friendships I cherished and the bridges we had built together. The soft hum of the summer air filled my lungs as I leaned back against my old porch swing, the creaking rhythm calming me, but still the unease twisted like a vine in my stomach. I had always considered myself a peacemaker, the kind of person who would rather diffuse a tense situation than throw a match at it, but here I was, grappling with a decision that felt monumental. My best friend Jenna had been meticulously planning a family vacation for months, a week-long getaway to the coast that she'd promised would be filled with laughter, beach bonfires, and endless sunshine. However, the excitement I felt morphed into something sour when, at a recent gathering, Jenna's brother Alex introduced me to his girlfriend, Tara. From the moment we shook hands, I could tell something was off. Tara had a way of smiling that felt forced, as if she were performing for an audience rather than engaging in a genuine interaction. Still, I brushed off my instincts, telling myself I was being overly sensitive. But it didn't take long for her true demeanor to surface. During a casual conversation with a group of friends, I had made a harmless joke about how I would never be brave enough to go bungee jumping, and Tara laughed a little too loudly, before leaning in and saying, "Well, good thing you're already so grounded, there's no chance of you jumping off anything anytime soon." It was meant to be a quip, but something in her tone pierced deeper into me, and I felt heat rise in my cheeks. I chose to ignore it, hoping it was a one-off incident. However, the comments soon escalated into a series of passive-aggressive jabs aimed at my tastes in music and my professional aspirations, each one wrapped in a layer of mockery that left me feeling increasingly small. I knew Tara was Jenna's brother's girlfriend and that I had to play it cool for the sake of everyone else, but when the day came for the beach trip, I felt a seething ball of anxiety lodged in my throat as memories of Tara's comments replayed like a broken record. When I got the message from Jenna, confirming the details of the trip, it struck my mind like a hammer. "You excited for family time?" It read, and my heart sank. How could I possibly enjoy a week in close quarters with someone who belittled me at every turn? Thoughts raced through my head. It seemed so trivial on the surface, but I had always been taught that you should trust your gut, no matter how small the issue may seem. Should I express my concerns, tell her what her brother's girlfriend had done to me? Or would it make me seem overdramatic, an asshole ruining a family vacation? I wrestled with myself throughout the night, tossing and turning until morning brought clarity, not resolution, but clarity. I had to make a choice, either go and endure the taunts or cut my losses and cancel my reservation, which felt like a betrayal against Jenna, who had so eagerly planned this trip. As the sun rose, I decided that I wouldn't attend this trip. I thought about how I deserved to be treated better, that allowing Tara to ruin something I had looked forward to would only deepen my frustration. I sent Jenna a calm and thoughtful message, explaining my feelings and why I felt I could not join them this time around. I poured my heart into those words, conveying that it wasn't her fault, and nothing to do with the family, it was about wanting to protect my own peace. The response came quickly, and my stomach churned as I watched the 3 little bubbles appear and disappear, Jenna typing and erasing, typing again. Finally, her message arrived, "I'm sorry. I had no idea. Do you want to talk about it?" In that moment, a wave of relief washed over me, I had chosen the right path. We talked later that evening, and I explained my experiences with Tara. Jenna listened patiently, her understanding soothing the wounds of doubt I had bandaged throughout the day. She expressed her apologies for me feeling uncomfortable, assuring me that she would discuss it with Alex, but also emphasized that she knew how hard it was to navigate complicated relationships within families. As we talked, something began to shift in my perspective. Perhaps Jenna wouldn't harbor resentment towards my decision after all, and with that thought came a mix of gratitude and sadness. It felt liberating in a way I hadn't anticipated. We ended our conversation with a casual promise to hang out soon, just the two of us. A few days later, I received a call from Jenna. "You won't believe this," she began with a laugh. After talking to Alex about Tara, he broke up with her. Apparently, she had been treating him that way too. Her voice cracked with laughter, but it wasn't malicious. It was clear Jenna found humor in the situation and validation in my choice to step away. As I hung up, I realized that I hadn't been the asshole I had feared becoming. I had done something brave, established boundaries. Sure, not everyone would understand my decision to skip the trip, but it felt undeniably right. I couldn't help but reflect on how sometimes prioritizing your own well-being could lead to a happier outcome than you'd ever expected, and as I settled back into my swing, the summer air cradled me like an embrace, reminding me that I had made the right choice. My story echoed in the quiet of my thoughts. Speaking up was an act of self-love. As the last rays of the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden hues across the sky, I let the stillness of the evening wrap around me like a comforting blanket. The tension from earlier in the week, those heated moments filled with uncertainty and anxiety, slowly began to dissolve into a mere backdrop of distant anxiety, allowing for introspection to take center stage. It was strange how life could shift so abruptly. One moment I was gearing up for what I thought would be a joyful family vacation with friends, and the next, I was choosing personal boundaries over chaotic gatherings that had become tinged with past grievances. I had known Sarah and her family for years. We shared countless gatherings, laughter-filled dinners, and holiday celebrations. Their home was a second family to me, yet the arrival of Jake's girlfriend, Mia, had changed the atmosphere entirely. She was charming enough to sweep her way into their circles, but beneath that veneer, I had sensed a thickness, a harshness I couldn't quite grasp until she unleashed her venomous remarks directly at me. The way she laughed, but not with me, always at my expense, fueling my insecurities to a raging fire, igniting a storm of emotions I felt powerless against. The night I confronted her, my nerves buzzed with anxiety, but a flicker of determination pushed me through. I stood up for myself, only to be met with condescension and mockery, a cacophony that echoed in the corners of my mind long after the conversation ended. The vacation had felt like an ultimatum. Either I pressured myself to endure another week of harassment disguised as humor, or I chose to walk away. But it was more than just a stressful week away. It was a reflection of a greater truth I'd been unwilling to acknowledge until now. I had convinced myself that I was hypersensitive, that maybe my reactions stemmed from personal insecurities rather than a genuine threat to my emotional well-being, but with every snide remark I recalled, I learned that my discomfort was valid. I deserved peace. Settling into my porch swing, the gentle creaking brought my mind back to the fleeting moments of boldness I'd felt when I finally said no. It felt as if a weight had lifted, and I marveled at the idea that sometimes, brave actions can spur waves of change we never expected. The afternoon breeze tangled playfully with my hair, carrying the scent of blooming flowers, and I grinned slightly, realizing that the warmth didn't just come from the setting sun but also from within my heart, a sense of freedom. I was finally free from the expectation that dictated how I should feel or act around people who did not respect me. The sun disappeared, casting the world into a soft twilight, and I settled into the stillness, letting the sounds of the night surround me. A distant thunder roll reminded me that storms could come, whether they were weather-related or within our relationships, and I realized something deeper, that it was okay to sometimes choose the calm solitude over the chaos, even if it meant stepping away from the people I loved. Before I knew it, my mind wandered to the possibility of how Sarah might react. She was the glue of our group, and I worried she would be disappointed or upset that I was skipping out. But what I knew with certainty was that I had put myself first, and for once, the discomfort of saying no transformed into the relief of being true to whom I had become. The night offered a sense of resolution, wrapping me in an almost dreamlike embrace, begging me to turn inward and reflect. I settled deeper into the swing, feeling the rhythm of life around me lull my thoughts into a soft hum. Perhaps tomorrow would bring new revelations and a deeper understanding of how to navigate relationships moving forward. As sleep beckoned, I found solace in the quiet and the decision I had made, a reminder that self-love doesn't just mean indulging in things that make you happy but also means having the courage to say enough is enough. And with that comforting thought in my mind, cradled by the feathery embrace of the summer night, I surrendered to the soft whisper of sleep. The days that followed were a gentle blur, a harmonious blend of quiet moments and the mundane rhythm of daily life. It was remarkable how, with my newfound clarity, even the simplest of routines felt more vibrant. My morning coffee tasted richer, the sunlight pouring through the window seemed warmer, and even my interactions with friends became more fulfilling. I reveled in this feeling, sinking deeper into the comfort of my own company, though a slight twinge of worry tugged at the edges of my contentment. Sure, I had been resolute in my decision to skip the family vacation, but there was a lingering thought that perhaps my friend had seen it as a betrayal rather than a necessary boundary. I could only imagine the conversations that buzzed among her family. They were close-knit, and I knew my choice wouldn't have gone unspoken. As the end of the week approached, I received a message from my friend, a simple "Hey, can we talk?" And I felt a familiar knot tighten in my stomach. It felt as if the air had thickened, wrapping around me like a heavy blanket. I hesitated, finger hovering over the screen as I contemplated my next move. What could she want to discuss? Would she confront me about my decision, or would she still be understanding? I took a deep breath, recalling the peace of that summer night, reminding myself that I was not only allowed to advocate for my own well-being but that I should cherish my needs in the same way I cherished my friendships. When we finally met up at our usual cafe, the one with the checkered tablecloths that always felt homey despite how tucked away it was from the bustling main street, my heart raced. She was already seated, her brow furrowed as she fiddled with the napkin, and I felt a rush of regret wash over me at the sight of her distress. I slid into the seat across from her, searching her eyes for clues, wanting nothing more than to dissolve the tension that lined the air between us. "Hey," she started, her voice soft yet laced with unease. "I've heard some things." And just like that, I felt my heartbeat quicken. She launched into the conversation, revealing whispers of concern from her family, comments that I was being unreasonable or selfish. Deep down, I expected this kind of fallout. It was a reflection of how affectionately they all seemed to regard one another, but I also found a flicker of disappointment creeping in as she relayed their sentiments. "I just wish you could have talked it out with us, you know? I thought we were on the same team," she murmured, her eyes dimmed reflecting confusion. In that moment, I felt a rush of emotions surge through me, anger, guilt, and a tinge of sadness. I wanted to lash out, to explain how her brother's girlfriend's behavior had threatened my peace, that my choice wasn't born of spite but of necessity. Yet her hurt was palpable, and I could sense my need to defend myself was clashing with the urge to reassure her. "I understand how it might seem," I began slowly, choosing my words with care. "But I had to protect myself. The way she treated me, it wasn't right. I tried to reach out to you, but every time I did, it felt like there was more tension, and I truly did fear what being around her would mean for me." For a moment, silence fell between us. I watched her shoulders relax slightly as she processed my words, and although I wished desperately for a way to bridge the gap that had formed, I held my breath, hoping that understanding would find its way between us. Eventually, she lifted her gaze, and there was a soft vulnerability in her expression. "I wish you had just told me everything sooner," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "None of us are perfect, and I don't regret wanting to include you. I guess it just hurt hearing you weren't coming along. I'm always grateful for friendships," I thought as we talked, pained in the moment yet intertwined in a kind of healing I hadn't expected. While she didn't outright apologize for her family's words, nor could I expect her to, we both recognized a pathway back to each other, one paved with honesty and understanding. As we navigated through our feelings and learned how to express our vulnerability, I felt the weight begin to lift from my chest, replaced by the flicker of something warm and familiar. We spent the rest of that afternoon laughing over shared memories and even exchanging stories about our most awkward moments. By the time we parted, the tension had dissipated, and we were back on that familiar wavelength, the bond more profound for having tested its limits. I felt an overwhelming sense of relief, like returning home after a long journey, and in my heart, I acknowledged that friendships, like life, would have their peaks and valleys. Weeks later, I received a postcard from their trip. There was my friend's cheerful handwriting, accompanied by a sweet note about the beach days and messy adventures, all punctuated by light-hearted illustrations. As I hung it up on my fridge, right next to the one from my own getaway, I realized the power of choice was a beacon for light in my life. It reminded me that standing up for my well-being didn't just protect me, it encouraged a space for openness and connection. The quiet comfort of being true to myself weaved itself into the friendships I cherished. In the larger narrative of my life, I learned that sometimes the ripples of a choice echo much longer than the initial impact, and the often scarier path of honesty and vulnerability not only nourishes my soul but also elevates the relationships I hold dear. I settled back into my swing one evening as summer whispered its last goodbyes, feeling eternally grateful for the lessons learned, the connections healed, and the quiet strength that grew in the acceptance of my own worth. As I closed my eyes that evening, lulled once more by the familiar sounds of dusk, I realized every step on this journey was but another beautiful stroke on the canvas of my life, colorful, wild, and utterly mine to shape. I've always prided myself on being a generous person, but the last few months have turned that belief on its head, and now, I find myself questioning my own values. My girlfriend, Rachel, and I had been together for just over a year when she broached the subject of her kids needing cars. Now, let me clarify, Rachel has 2 children from a previous marriage, Jenna, who is 15, and Max, who is 13. From the moment I met them, I felt an instant bond. Jenna had this fierce spirit, often caught between her childhood and looming adulthood, while Max was a whirlwind of energy, always looking to make people laugh. Sharing time with them was pure joy. Yet, as Rachel's kids got older, the conversations inevitably shifted to the need for independence. They wanted their own rides to school, friends' houses, and extracurricular activities. It was an ordinary Thursday when Rachel casually said, "You know, I've been thinking the kids really need cars to be more independent. Wouldn't it be great if we could pick something up for them?" At first, I chuckled, thinking she was joking. Surely, she didn't expect me to dive into a discussion about buying 2 cars just like that. But when I saw the look on her face, half serious, half hopeful, I realized this was no lighthearted suggestion. I could feel the knot tightening in my stomach as I recalled my own struggles. I was still paying off student loans and saving to start a life of my own. I hesitated, my mind racing through various possibilities, trying to balance my own financial responsibility with the desire to support Rachel and her family. The conversation became heated, but I remained calm. "Rachel, I love your kids, but I can't afford to buy them cars. It's just not realistic for me," I explained, choosing my words with care. She seemed taken aback, disappointment settling in her eyes. "I thought we were in this together," she said softly, and I felt an unwelcome sting of guilt. It wasn't just the idea of cars, it was the unspoken tension between a partner who wanted to share burdens and a guy who was barely keeping his head above water. Over the following weeks, the tension lingered. I noticed subtle changes in Rachel's demeanor. She became quieter, often lost in thought. On one occasion, while driving back from a family dinner, Jenna asked casually if I was going to buy them cars. I felt a sharp pang in my heart, not wanting to disappoint her but also knowing how strained my finances were. "It's complicated, Jenna," I replied, hoping to deflect. The laughter we used to share felt overshadowed by unspoken expectations and misunderstandings. Around this time, I took a hard look at myself and the relationship. I adored Rachel, and these kids meant the world to me, but it seemed I was inadvertently stepping into roles I wasn't ready for. I loved that Rachel envisioned a future where we united our families, but I had to be cautious about my own needs too. I chose to clear the air. "Rachel," I said one evening, taking her hand. "I care about you and your kids, but I also have to think about my financial goals. I'm not saying I won't help out in other ways, like giving rides or supporting them, but I can't commit to buying them cars. As I confessed my frustrations, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Rachel listened quietly, her expression shifting from disbelief to understanding. "I get it," she said finally, her voice softening. "Sometimes I forget you're still figuring things out for yourself." I could sense the relief in her voice when we turned the corner, leaving anger and disappointment behind. From that point forward, our relationship evolved. I started finding ways to help Jenna and Max without putting myself in financial jeopardy. We worked on small projects together, and I even taught them how to save up for things they wanted. Months later, I received a message from Rachel that made my heart swell. "The kids are working on their savings for cars. I think they've adopted your advice," she wrote, and I couldn't help but smile at the thought of them taking initiative. As we sat together that night, reminiscing over our journey, it became clear that we had come a long way. Though my situation hadn't changed much financially, I was at peace knowing we had built a stronger bond through honesty and support. Reflecting on it all, I found comfort in the notion that relationships aren't about merely giving, they're about growing together through adversity. I had feared being seen as selfish, but in the end, what transpired reaffirmed a truth: it's important to recognize one's own limits and communicate openly. I was still part of their lives, just in a different role. And as I fell asleep that night, I felt grateful for the love we had cultivated amid uncertainty, looking forward to all the moments yet to come. Update: a few weeks later, Rachel and I sat down with Jenna and Max to discuss plans for their first car. Instead of just handing them cash, we organized a small family project, painting and refurbishing an old car Rachel's parents had. The kids were ecstatic and learned invaluable skills throughout the process. Watching them work on something they could own ignited a sense of pride in them, but more importantly, it strengthened our bond as a family. In the end, it was about much more than just the cars. It was a lesson in responsibility, independence, and support that we would all carry forward. As the days turned into weeks, our little project blossomed into something more than just a car refurbishment. It became a way for Jenna and Max to understand the value of hard work and teamwork, lessons that would follow them into adulthood. The garage was filled with a blend of laughter and the occasional argument over color choices, tools, and who was in charge of what task. I found myself laughing more than I had in years, feeling like a part of something bigger as I watched Rachel cheer them on, wiping her hands on an old rag and beaming with pride. One Saturday, I suggested that we decorate the trunk with positive affirmations. Each kid could choose a quote that inspired them. Jenna picked "Believe in yourself," while Max, still a bit of a jokester, went with "I fixed it, so I own it." Rachel and I scrambled to find some old paint and brushes, and soon the trunk of the car emblazoned with their chosen words became a family masterpiece. The act of creating something that was truly theirs, a canvas on wheels, made Jenna and Max light up in ways that store-bought gifts never could. I remember one afternoon, after splashing paint around and making ridiculous faces while trying to channel my inner artist, Jenna turned to me with her bright blue eyes shining. "Will you help us do this again someday?" she asked, her voice earnest. I nodded, caught up in the moment. "Absolutely. This can be the first of many projects. We'll build cars, tree houses, or even go-karts, whatever you can think of." The commitment struck me as I spoke. The weight of my words settled in my chest, but it also felt electric, like I was weaving threads into our growing fabric of family. As the weeks continued to pass, we worked diligently, putting in time every weekend, replacing parts, and learning about the engine. I took on the heavier, more technical parts while Rachel guided the kids through the finer points of sanding and painting. Each task was a chance for Jenna and Max to ask questions, and for us to share stories of our own youthful follies, like the time I managed to get my first car stuck in a mud pit because I thought four-wheel drive meant you could drive anywhere. One evening, while we cleaned up after a particularly messy painting session, I was surprised to see a glimmer of uncertainty appear in Jenna's eyes. She had always been the more confident of the two, but tonight, something was off. "Are we doing it wrong?" she muttered, glancing at the splatters of paint that dotted the ground, some bold strokes that had landed on her shirt. It struck me then just how important this whole experience was to her. If the car didn't turn out perfect, would that mean we had failed some unspoken test? I knelt down beside her, resting my arms on my knees. "What do you think?" I asked gently. "Does it feel like we're working together? Are you having fun?" She frowned for a moment, staring at the paint on her shirt and considering. "Yeah, but the car needs to look perfect." "Jenna," I said softly, "life isn't about being perfect. It's about learning, growing, and having fun along the way." I watched as the words sank in, her expression slowly shifting toward relief and understanding, like the clouds lifting after a storm. Finally, the day came when we would unveil the refurbished car. We had all worked tirelessly, and the anticipation electrified the air as we gathered in the driveway for the big reveal. The sun shone down, catching the bright colors that adorned the car's surface in a way that made it look almost magical. Rachel stood beside me, her hand clasped in mine, her eyes glistening with excitement. Jenna and Max stood in front of the vehicle, their faces a mixture of disbelief and sheer joy, and as they reached out to touch their creation, I felt a surge of pride that ran deeper than I expected. Jenna joined Max in jumping up and down, squealing with happiness, and Rachel and I exchanged a glance, a silent confirmation of what we had built together, not just in terms of the car but within our family unit. I knew this was a moment they would remember, a fragment of time marked by laughter, creativity, and the unwavering bond we shared. Later, as we took turns behind the wheel on a quiet street, what struck me wasn't just the shiny paint or the engine purring, it was the way Jenna and Max discussed their plans for their driving future, each word a reflection of their blossoming maturity and sense of responsibility. I couldn't help but smile, thinking back to the conflict I had initially faced regarding whether or not I should buy them cars. The struggle had been real, but what we gained was immeasurable. As I lay in bed that night, I felt a sense of fulfillment wash over me, a warmth that spread from my chest to my fingertips. In teaching them the value of ownership and effort, I found that I was learning alongside them. Suddenly, our pastime projections morphed into a bonding experience, a way for Rachel and I to not only build cars but to build a family, brick by cherished brick. A week later, I received a message from an old coworker who wanted to update me about a job opening. The idea of returning to work jostled around in my brain, but I barely thought about it. Something deeper was stirring within me. The realization that I didn't need a high-paying job to feel fulfilled came to me like a whisper. I had discovered a different way to be present, engaged, and genuinely happy. Although our yard was filled with laughter from our car projects, I had also conjured an understanding that family was not just defined by blood, but by the memories we created together. Several months later, as our car adventures continued to unfold, Jenna and Max decided they wanted to do something special for Rachel and me. One afternoon, they surprised us with a picnic in the park, complete with sandwiches and homemade cookies that had some very creative, but slightly chaotic icing. We laughed as they took charge of the basket, and as we settled down beneath a tree, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. As I watched the kids run around, their laughter a melody of joy, I realized that I would never trade these moments for material things. I might not have given them cars without conditions at first, but I had given them the tools to navigate life more effectively, which would prove to be far more valuable in the long run. Reflecting on everything, I realized that though my initial hesitation stemmed from wanting to be a responsible adult rather than a flashy type, it had led to something far more profound, and although I would probably always be the one saying, "Let's paint the trunk," I had also become the dad who could tell a joke, share genuine pieces of wisdom, and make memories that would last a lifetime. Sometimes, I would hear Jenna and Max reminiscing about our adventures, and I couldn't help but feel that we were building not just a family of the future but a legacy, one filled not just with cars but with the cherished stories of our lives. As the days passed, our weekends became filled with laughter, paint splatters, and the smell of motor oil, a unique blend of chaos and joy that transformed our garage into a makeshift workshop and a haven for memories. Rachel would often send me gentle nudges of encouragement as I attempted to wield a wrench while Jenna and Max handled the power tools with surprising finesse. Each time they'd succeed in fastening a bolt or sanding down a rough edge, their smiles would widen, the joy resonating in their eyes as if they'd just conquered a mountain. These moments were powerful reminders of how quickly they were growing up, and each project fueled my desire to be more present and supportive in their lives. One evening, as dusk began to settle in, we found ourselves sprawled out on an old blanket we'd tossed in the trunk while we waited for paint to dry. The kids shared their dreams. Jenna wanted to travel the world and write stories of her adventures, while Max, always the jokester, mused about becoming a famous comedian. As I listened, I realized that this experience was about more than just cars. It was forging a foundation for their ambitions and aspirations. Weeks later, the old car began to transform. It was no longer just a rusted frame. It became a vibrant representation of teamwork, laughter, and shared sweat. We painted it in bold blues and cheerful yellows, mixing colors as if each swirl of paint was a thread in the tapestry of our newly formed family. Friends and neighbors stopped by, often asking if they could lend a hand, turning our small project into a community affair. One Saturday afternoon, while the kids and I painted the hood, Rachel appeared with freshly baked cookies, and her eyes sparkled with pride as she watched us. I felt a warmth in my chest knowing that I was no longer just a boyfriend to her. I had evolved into a partner and a father figure, nurturing the lives around me with kindness, patience, and a whole lot of love. When the project finally reached completion, the sense of accomplishment was palpable. The day we unveiled the finished car was nothing short of magical. Jenna and Max jumped up and down, their faces lit with astonished delight as we took a family picture beside the newly restored vehicle. However, with this joy came an underlying anxiety rooted in my mind. Would they expect the same kind of effort and commitment forever? What if life became too busy, or what if the bond we had nurtured began to unravel? I discussed these uncertainties with Rachel one quiet evening when the kids were snugly tucked in. We illuminated the room with soft light, a warm cup of tea in hand, and she shared a reassuring sentiment. "It's normal to worry," she said, resting her head on my shoulder. "But remember, it's not about the cars or the crafts. It's about creating a space where they feel valued and supported, whether it's with paintbrushes or just by listening to their hopes. They'll remember the love, not just the projects." Her words resonated deep within me, and I realized she was right. These kids, Jenna and Max, were resilient and adaptive, just as life would need them to be. My role wasn't to guarantee a perfect scenario constantly but rather to be their constant support through life's uncertainties. As days turned to months, I witnessed their confidence blossom, not just in their abilities with mechanics but also in their schoolwork and friendships. They naturally began taking leadership roles among their classmates, eagerly engaging in school projects. Each time they tackled a new challenge, I felt a surge of pride that they might carry the values we cultivated through our weekend car projects into the rest of their lives, providing a sense of direction only strengthened by the love we built together. Reflecting on this journey, I found clarity in accepting my title as dad in their lives, embracing the role with open arms. As winter approached, and car maintenance became less frequent, we shifted our focus to indoor projects. Jigsaw puzzles and game nights filled the house with energy. The old car stood proudly outside, an emblem of our collective achievements and the dawning of a familial bond that felt everlasting. I often pondered the future but found comfort in knowing that our legacy would consist of more than material objects. It would be woven with the stories of resilience, compassion, and unwavering support that would carry us through any trials that lay ahead. Update: fast forward several years, and the old car became a treasured memento. Jenna and Max took it to prom with their friends, painted stars on the roof, and filled it with memories I knew would last them a lifetime. And as Rachel and I watched them drive off into the night, her hands securely clasped in mine, I felt overwhelming gratitude for every moment, good and bad, that had brought us here, a beautifully imperfect family, ready to face the world together, one adventure at a time. It all started on a rainy Thursday when I found myself staring at my phone, contemplating whether I should answer the call from Jamie. Jamie and I had been best friends since childhood, our lives woven together like the strands of an old tapestry. He was the kind of person who wore his heart on his sleeve, and while I admired him for that, it often led to the kind of emotional labors that I sometimes felt ill-prepared to navigate. The thing is, I owed him $60 from a bet we placed 3 months prior. At the time, it felt like a good idea. He had bet I wouldn't see a specific movie in theaters, a kind of absurd challenge we often entertained to pass the time. I had pulled through and watched it, laughing at how easily I'd won. But life had a funny way of making one's priorities feel scattered, and with each passing month, that small debt lingered in the back of my mind, like a familiar yet annoying itch I couldn't quite reach. As I sat on my couch, the rain beating against the window, I felt an odd sense of dread. Jamie had been talking about his financial struggles lately, how his part-time job didn't cover his rent or his bills, and I could feel the weight of that call pressing against my chest. I hesitated for a moment, finally picking up the phone, but the conversation wasn't what I anticipated. Instead of the usual banter, Jamie launched into a heartfelt rant about how he felt completely overwhelmed by the world. It was like listening to a dam break, all his frustrations flowing out as he told me about the suffocating weight of his responsibilities. As he spoke, I felt my stomach twist into knots. How could I ask him to let go of this trivial debt when he was clearly in pain? "Look, Jamie, I just need to say something," I interrupted hesitantly. "I know I owe you that $60, but with everything going on, can we just let it slide for now?" I could hear the silence on the other end, how the weight of my words sank into the atmosphere, and I could almost picture his brow furrowing in contemplation. Finally, he spoke, and there was a tremor in his voice. "You know, I really need that money, though." My heart sank deeper. I wanted to help him, but the truth was, my own finances weren't exactly stable. It felt selfish to hold on to my money, but asking him for patience felt equally wrong. Days turned into weeks, and our conversation echoed in my mind like a haunting melody. I could see Jamie's disappointment flash across my memory, see the disbelief etched into his features, and the burden of guilt settled firmly on my shoulders. I tried to reach out, perhaps offering to treat him to coffee or something small to remind him that I cared, but our meetings became fewer as he threw himself into extra shifts. Just as I was spiraling into my own feelings of guilt, Jamie reached out once more, but this time, there was an edge to his voice that set me on alert. He wanted to meet up, and with that, I felt a sense of impending doom settle over me. Did he want to discuss the money again, or was there something else brewing beneath the surface? The anxiety was palpable inside me, it was almost a physical thing, weighing heavy on my chest as I approached the cafe we frequented. When I arrived, he was already seated at our usual table, fidgeting with his phone, looking tangled up in thought. I slid into the seat and gave him a small smile, which he returned with a nod that seemed devoid of any real warmth. "I've been thinking a lot about our last conversation," he began, his voice steady but lacking its usual enthusiasm. "That money. It's not just about the money for me. It feels like a lack of respect, like you don't value our friendship." The words hit me like a slap, and I felt my chest constrict with shame. I started to defend myself, but I could hear the raw hurt in his voice, and my mind raced to find the right words that wouldn't sound like empty excuses. "I thought maybe since things were hard for you, we could let it slide." His gaze was piercing, and I could almost see the crumbling pieces of our history floating between us. The conversations we used to have, the laughter we shared, now felt grim and fragile, like the remnants of a dream slipping away. "But it's not just about the money, it's the principle," he pressed, emotion layered in each word. I could sense the anger rising, and a part of me wanted to retreat, but I owed it to both of us to engage. "Jamie, it's not that I don't care or value you. I'm trying to navigate my own life too. What if I'm struggling in my own way, just like you?" The moment hung heavy, and for the first time, I saw the cracks in his armor begin to show. "I didn't realize you felt that way," he admitted, his voice low, the fight momentum suddenly dulled. I could see the realization wash over him, just as much as it flooded me. Perhaps I wasn't the only one struggling with insecurities masked as arrogance. In the days that followed, we both took a step back, breathing in the unease of our friendship and beginning to stitch it back together with more understanding. I did pay him back the $60. I realized that money was only one part of the equation. What mattered more was the open dialogue we finally had, the clarity that settled between us, allowing both our vulnerabilities to emerge. This experience transformed our friendship. It was no longer about the money but about feeling seen and valued. An update in my mind now gleefully whispered to me, I learned that competitions between friends can lead to both friction and an unexpected depth in connection. Looking back, that seemingly trivial debt acted like a guidepost, leading me to confront not just my financial responsibilities, but my emotional ones too. It became a lesson in empathy and respect, a reminder that true friendship treasures open-hearted conversations over mere transactions. And those rainy Thursdays? They aren't so dreary anymore, as they've become. Reminders of our renewed bond, strengthened through vulnerability, reminding me every day that sometimes, it's worth diving deeper to find the light. As I settled into my routine, the mundanity of each rainy Thursday transformed into a ritual of sorts. Each week, I would sit on my porch, a steaming cup of coffee in hand, as the rain drizzled on the roof above, creating a comforting soundtrack of muted rain patters and distant thunder rumbles. The street, with its slick, glistening pavement, took on a different hue. Each drop of water seemed to wash away not just the grime of the day but also the tension that had once hovered between James and me. I would think back to that moment when I looked him in the eyes and saw the hurt festering beneath the surface, beneath our laughter and easy banter, like an unresolved question lurking in the shadows. It was in this quiet space of reflection that I learned the importance of humility and accountability, both to myself and to those closest to me. I never forgot that debt, the $60 that, at one point, felt insurmountable, almost like a millstone around my neck. Yet that very symbol of conflict became a mirror, prompting a deeper inquiry into how I navigated my relationships. James and I began to spend more time together, engaging in long talks that seemed endless under the canopy of evening stars or the dim, warm glow of a dimmed living room. We would play board games, dive into old movies, and explore our small town's hidden gems, often with laughter trailing behind us like a kite on a gentle breeze. Those moments drew out a connection I hadn't known we'd lacked before. Conversations became more meaningful, filled with genuine inquiries into each other's lives, worries, and dreams. There was a palpable shift. The unspoken tension was replaced with a camaraderie built on shared experiences and vulnerability. No longer did I feel the burden of that $60. Instead, it served as the catalyst for deeper exchanges. One particularly rainy Thursday, as we sipped our drinks and watched the clouds roll in, I opened up. "You know, I used to think friendship was just about hanging out and having fun, James. But I realize now it's about the tough stuff too, like debts and misunderstandings. I really appreciate how we've navigated through all of that. It brought us closer." He nodded, looking pensive, and then he smiled softly. I have to admit, I felt awkward about it, too. It wasn't just the money, it was what it represented. I don't want to feel like I'm holding something over you when all I really want is your company. The honesty hung in the air, wrapping around us like the comforting embrace of the warm sweaters we wore. I chuckled at the absurdity of how a financial transaction had morphed into a vehicle for deeper understanding. James reached for his phone, and with a twinkle in his eye, he pulled up a meme that perfectly encapsulated our journey, and we erupted into laughter, once again transported to a place where our bond felt effortless. That evening, the rain intensified, pounding against windows like a drum, but instead of keeping us boxed in, it felt liberating, an orchestra accompanying our newfound harmony. As the weeks turned into months, I cherished those Thursdays, never missing a chance to reconnect and nurture our friendship. I even made a mental note to repay the $60, but truthfully, it mattered less and less with each passing conversation. The emphasis shifted from debt to conversation, from obligation to connection. In a way, our playful banter transformed into discussions that danced around deeper themes: life, love, aspirations, and I began to realize that money and obligations are mere facets of a much larger picture. One evening, James surprised me with an early birthday celebration, a small gathering with close friends. As we settled in with laughter and stories, I felt a sense of belonging wash over me, filling the gaps that I'd sometimes not even noticed existed. In that warm glow, I leaned over and whispered to James, "Hey, I owe you something." He looked at me quizzically, his eyebrow raised, and I continued, this deep sense of gratitude for helping me see what truly matters. He just chuckled and nudged me playfully, a silent acknowledgement of our journey together. Though the rainy Thursdays still came, they carried a different energy now. They were soaked in laughter, born of warmth, and threaded with the beautiful realization that sometimes a rough patch can lead to a tapestry of richer connections. And though I never explicitly paid him back that $60, what emerged was far more valuable, an understanding that true friendship transcends financial debts, weaving an everlasting bond that brightens even the darkest of days. Perhaps, in its own way, that really was a payment worth cherishing. In the weeks that followed, I found myself smiling each time I heard the gentle patter of rain against my window. What used to feel monotonous now evoked an aurora of warmth in my heart. Those rainy Thursdays transformed into a cherished routine. I could almost hear the rain whispering secrets of camaraderie while I shuffled into my living room, bundled in a cozy blanket, a steaming mug of tea cradled in my hands. My phone buzzed to life, and a familiar name lit up the screen: Lucas. We had developed our own rhythm, a dance of banter and understanding that flowed easily, aided by shared memories and laughter. "Hey, you ready for our rain date?" the text read. Smiling to myself, I replied with a quick always. As I threw on my favorite hoodie, ready to dive into yet another cozy chapter of our friendship. Lucas arrived shortly after, a playful grin plastered across his face. "I brought snacks," he announced, producing a crinkly bag of popcorn and some gummy bears as if they were the treasures of a long-lost expedition. Settled on my couch, we slipped into our ritual, Netflix binging through the dreariest of mean days, outlining an adventure. Dipping into the surreal and the comedic, tracing myriad twists across genres, just like our conversations. And as the rain continued its serenade outside, something curious happened. Each time we laughed, each time we shared a meaningful look or a story from our past, I often found myself reflecting on the emotional balance we'd struck, threading through memories that we hadn't quite explored before. "I was thinking about that one time you tried to teach me how to cook," Lucas teased, nudging my shoulder. "You nearly burnt the house down." We both erupted in laughter, the shared embarrassment that once lurked in the corners now an emblem of progress, of understanding we had built upon one another's vulnerabilities. "Hey, don't forget I saved our lives from those flaming pancakes," I countered, recalling the chaos with a smirk. He shot back an exaggerated gasp, mock horror in his eyes. "I wouldn't call them pancakes. They were more like edible hockey pucks." I laughed harder, each taunt adding another layer to the fabric of our friendship. But nestled amid all the joy was something heavier, lurking just beneath the surface, a quiet contemplation about the essence of our exchanges. I had been hesitant to confront the emotional complexities that lay intertwined with our shared experiences. It was Lucas who finally led me there, unknowingly yet gently. With the popcorn bowl long emptied and the final credits rolling on yet another movie, I found myself breaking the easy banter, wanting to lay bare a thought that had occupied my mind. "You know, I've been thinking a lot about that $60, I said, sifting through my memories. "It's strange, but I feel like it became this little anchor for me, a symbol of how we needed that moment back then." Lucas turned to me, and his gaze grew serious. "You really don't need to feel guilty about that. I mean, we've moved past it, haven't we?" His voice was gentle, yet firm, a guiding light through the murkier waters. "But I appreciate that you're thinking of it differently now." The honesty in his tone ignited a flicker of warmth inside me. It showed me how fragile friendships can feel, how they can be caught up in miscommunications or assumptions. But it also reminded me of how imperative it is to find that empathy, to seek understanding instead of cementing a line between us. We lingered in that silence, where nothing needed to be filled with words as the calming sound of raindrops on the window enveloped us. But as if carrying the weight of that moment, I reached for him, causing a spontaneous whirlwind of revelations to unspool between us. "Thank you for being patient with me through all that. What are friends for?" He shrugged, smiling softly, yet the sincerity rippled through his eyes, anchoring me in the moment. That revealed something profound within me. The comfort of connection we had both nurtured through our shared antics and deep conversations was everything I had truly needed, more than any monetary value ever could hold. I realized that it wasn't about erasing the debt, nor tying it neatly with a bow, but about celebrating the transformation it had invoked in us. And as we settled into a more comfortable silence, I felt a lightness wash over me, the previously heavy air of expectations gently dispersing into something far richer. Fast forward again to another rainy Thursday. It was becoming my favorite sanctuary each week. This time, I felt the soft tickle of excitement ripple through my veins as Lucas arrived with a new bottle of board games and tales ready to unfurl. We played, we teased, and we occasionally drifted into deeper conversations, additional layers of our lives revealed moment by moment. In the end, I didn't need to pay him back. Instead, the debt faded, replaced instead by a tapestry of trust woven through shared experiences, a deeper connection that shimmered more brightly than any money exchanged could manage. And through the seemingly mundane, fragile threads of rainy Thursdays, we built a bond that could weather any storm, eager and ready for whatever lay ahead.